Can you name three things that you don't like about Singapore?
The first thing, they still don't give me PR. That's the biggest annoying thing. What else I don't like about Singapore?
Singapore is too perfect.
Yeah, too perfect. You see, I struggle. Too perfect.
This is Artur. He's been living in Singapore for 9 years. He works for a creative agency and has a passion for stand-up comedy as a hobby. As we chatted, Artur shared tips on how to make friends with locals and explain taboo topics in a local comedy. I'm Max, entrepreneur and YouTuber from Singapore. Let's do it!
Have you picked up any Singlish?
Sometimes for fun, I just add la occasionally. Maybe you can say like ayo or alamak.
Oh, ayo is my favorite.
Ayo is my favorite.
I always say it. Ayo.
Yeah.
Wallah, eh?
Actually, when I just arrived, I was so scared of losing my English because everyone was just telling me like, oh, there's gonna be Singlish and it will ruin you. So when I was a student here, I came and I was like, oh no, I have to force myself to follow proper British English, drinking tea and everything. I know some people like they've mastered Singlish and probably mingling altogether. Who knows? Maybe that's why they're not giving me PR.
Can you name three things that you like the most about Singapore?
I would say climate, that's for sure, because I was choosing between the UK. I was choosing between Manchester and Singapore, so climate is definitely number one. I guess largely I would say like opportunities, again, in comparison to a lot of other places. And the third one, international, multicultural aspect. For me, it is very important. I've been always attracted to different languages, different cultures.
Do you remember your first impressions about Singapore when you came here first time?
First of all, immediate humidity, I think it just like covers you and then you just start sweating just by standing somewhere. I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. One of the biggest impressions was how green it was. One tree covers the whole parking lot. You just immediately feel there's a city built in the jungle. I love greenery, I love parks. I felt lack of it back in Russia, and then suddenly you just walk around and there are so many giant trees.
After 9 years, your impression about Singapore changed or not really?
I guess it's just deepened on all the aspects that I liked from the very first time I started here. I think it's still a very international, multicultural place, green, safe, very developed, obviously attracts a lot of international business. I think the community is still very open. From day one, you always feel like it's a melting pot like the US, but I felt like even more accepting and everyone's just here hustling and trying to make a living. That's still my impression.
Do you remember like if you need to make an effort to get a part of the community, local community, or it was kind of smooth and easy for you?
I think it was fairly smooth because I always tell people like I came to Singapore knowing literally 0 people. So the first person I knew was just my coordinator in the university. And then after that, when we started studying, obviously the first friends are just my classmates, but then you start chatting. I was in the university football team, so then you make friends with some local guys there. Then I was trying to do some other sports. You go to some events, and then people are just very open, curious. They learn about you. Obviously the basic questions are always the same, or where you're from, how long you've been in Singapore, or you're from Russia. It's a very unique background, so obviously a lot of questions and stereotypes about that. But yeah, it was fairly smooth. I didn't feel that people are just segregated by their own, like, oh, locals only with locals, expats only with expats. I think it's quite a good mix.
It's a great feeling, like, to be, I would say, not the major culture domination in Singapore. Like, compared to if you're like in Britain, it's a great country, but you have to be into British culture. Like, if you send your kids to school, like, it will be British school, like, heavily dominated. And in Singapore, it's a different story. I want to find more interesting people for you to interview them. If you want to support my work, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much. Can you break down your expenses in Singapore?
I've been renting for $2,500.
That's a good price.
That's a good price.
How many rooms?
It's just one bedroom studio.
Still, it's a great price.
It's a great price in comparison to the current market. Yeah. I guess I've been living there for a while, so I think they still give me a good price, but normally it would probably be already $3,500. These days for condos, one bedrooms, yeah, probably like $4,000 easily. That's something you can allocate. I mean, food-wise and everything, I guess, starting from few dollars on food courts, right? And sometimes you might go out somewhere with drinks and some, I guess, like mid-tier restaurants, and it can be a few $100s easily, right, per night. I mostly use buses and MRT, so like Taxis sometimes happen, but again, I think in comparison to a lot of places, very affordable. Just got back from Dubai, like Singapore prices for taxis definitely much cheaper, right? So like taxi trips, from let's say $10 to $20, right, on average probably, and then maybe like airport or in the night they might be like a bit more expensive, like $20, $30, but that's per trip. And then MRT or buses for one trip is like $1-2, right, roughly. I play tennis, for example, quite a lot. So I would say renting the court might cost you $5-10, depending on how many hours and locations. Travel, obviously, that's a more of a outstanding rates, and then depends on where you fly and how much, I guess.
If you travel around the region, it's pretty cheap actually, all Southeast Asia.
Definitely. I mean, like, for example, Phuket, right, it's like almost like a countryside, right? 1.5 hours and you're already there. Very cheap flights, and then you compare it to flying to Europe, it's like $1,000. Like New Zealand, probably like $2,000 just to get there, and you're already out of the budget, right? I also pay, I think, like $1,000 plus for my personal hospitalization insurance. Mobile, I think like $20 per month. Home internet, right? Also probably like $40 or something. Monthly utilities like water, gas, etc. Probably around like plus minus $100, right? Normal, typical stuff.
My first experience with stand-up comedy in Singapore was a bit shocking. I came to the show and it was like a lot of jokes about like race, sex, and like gay people. I was like, what the hell? I was a bit like positively shocked that there are these kind of jokes in Singapore.
I think overall, if you watch stand-up enough before, you kind of know that usually stand-up comedians are tackling a lot of edgy and controversial topics and always playing sometimes rough and tough, right, and find those tricky things. So I guess maybe just in general, knowing Singapore being very kind of conservative and I guess rule-based and etc., probably that can be as a bit of a shock. But to me personally, I knew that stand-up is gonna be stand-up, so I knew that that's kind of the fun bit. And honestly, I quite often advise a lot of people who travel to Singapore or even like anywhere, if you want to know a lot about local culture, find some local comedy shows, because quite often, immediately within like 2-hour show, you already know what are the local pain points, what are the local stereotypes, what are people like worrying about, always annoyed about, angry about. It's kind of like a very nice like slice of the community and society in a way, like in a very concentrated fashion.
My Russian friend asked me, Artur, how much does it cost to take Pfizer in Singapore? I said, all vaccines are free for everyone here. What? You guys have communism? I said, of course. That's why Singapore is called Little Red Dot.
Closer to the end of the show, I usually say that as a Russian, I feel like home in Singapore because I moved from one democratic country to another. So this joke usually is loved by both locals and foreigners, and also people from IMDA as well.
I think almost all the jokes are can in Singapore, apart of religion. Race, sure, like sex, certainly. Politics, LGBTQ, yes. But religion is like, meh, not really.
I think like if you go to more shows, you will hear that people still do it. But I would say the biggest judge and the biggest censor is the audience. So I think a lot of comics cut these jokes because they just see that when they do them, maybe there is not much reaction. Maybe other comics do them and they also don't get reaction. Then it's like, okay, maybe Singapore in general doesn't like to talk about like religion. So it's not like, oh, I'm removing the joke about it because someone might be offended, because every joke offends someone at a certain level, right? Because if no joke offends anyone, it's a bad joke, right? Because there are no stakes, there is no conflict, there is nothing to resolve and laugh about, right? There's always a victim. But I guess it's just maybe there are some local things that people just, we don't care about religion here. So then like, okay, you can write like 10 minutes about religion, but if no one is laughing, then if you're a good listening, reflecting comedian, you'll probably cut it out or revise it somehow.
Can you recall some show that you experienced anything like unusual?
I just recently went to Koh Samui in Thailand, so I did a headline show there. And there were a few things that happened. First of all, there was a drunk Finnish heckler who just sat in the first row with a bottle of vodka. So I clearly knew that's a red flag and a threat coming from there. And even before I opened my mouth and said the first lines, he just started shouting like, are you supporting Putin or not, for like 5 minutes in a row. So the other audience members had to actually stop him to let me actually start the show. And then I got heckled by the phone because it was in a hotel cafeteria. So there was actually a phone under the tablecloth, and it was just kept ringing, and there were lights, and the cafe staff was trying to sort it out how to finish. And finally there was a guy who was laughing way too loud and way too long. Like every joke, he was laughing for like 10 seconds, 15 seconds. So you just have to wait for him to shut up before you start the next joke, right? Because you can't just step on the laughter. So it was just ruining the timing, and all the rest were distracted by him. So that was the fun gig. But I guess, again, like, you have to deal with it, and that's the beauty of it, because it exists only on that night. It will not happen anytime again. So in a way, you try to make fun of it, weave it into your material, and hopefully it's not as bad as I make it sound. It was a fun gig.
How much roughly the most successful comedians can make, like, per month, let's say?
Typical stand-up circuit club scene, and it's not only Singapore, I think it's pretty global. Usually headliners, I think it's usually a few $100s, like $200, $300 per like headline night, right? So usually it's like 30 minutes, you're closing the show, etc. The corporate shows, I mean, like, I would say from 1,000 to 5,000, probably some bigger names during the Christmas festivals maybe can get even like $10,000 for performances. So that's kind of the range, right? But then again, like, you don't do them every night, right? You have to work hard and find these opportunities. When we talk about those comics who are on the road, then of course they just have an opportunity to bulk up and bundle a lot of things. And I mean, a lot of like American or British comics, they come to Asia, but they do Asian tours because obviously air tickets are expensive. So then they try to justify it by like having like 5-6 countries on the road, and then they just do quite a few gigs, and hopefully that combined money make a difference.
Have you ever thought of like leaving your career to pursue only stand-up comedy career?
At a certain point, I just reached the stage where I started getting those inquiries. I guess I talked to a lot of full-timers, considered what matters to me, what lifestyle I want to live, and I guess like financial stability and all the other aspects. And I realized for me, doing it part-time is the best mode. I mean, in general, just for me personally, creating art without having financial pressure of making the ends meet is the best way, because I think if I have to make a living out of it, maybe at certain points you will be forced to start making some artistic sacrifices, and I guess this artistic integrity is quite important for me. So I'd rather do something that I really feel very honest and funny about, and maybe not many people like it, but at least I stay true to myself, versus like, I need to pay rent, so let me write whatever jokes, like racial jokes, and maybe I don't like racial jokes, right? So then it's a bit of a compromise, so I don't want to do that. So personally, no, like, I never considered. Plus, I don't think I like the idea of living on the road, being in the airports all the time and hotels and everything. It's just, I like the idea of travel, but just slow travel for fun. And I mean, the way I perform overseas now is basically combined with business trips or holidays. Then I just try to find some gigs as well when I'm going somewhere. But yeah, like doing it all the time, I think it might be too tiring. I don't want to feel that fun, passionate thing becomes a job and routine, and then you hate it like any job, right? You probably hate this, right? You hate your job now.
Yeah, I don't like it.
I know.
What should like the one who's thinking to move to Singapore should know before moving to Singapore?
Singapore has always been hyper competitive, and since the pandemic days, it's only got even more competitive, and there is quite a bit of protectionism in terms of prioritizing local workforce. So I think just being aware of that, the fact that you will be competing with a lot of people, and getting employment passes, S passes, is extremely difficult now. I guess that's just like professional knowledge and competition-wise, right? Otherwise, quite a few things that we already talked about. If you're coming from completely different climate, just get ready for climate shock. Food-wise, I mean, I'm fine. I quite enjoy fusion cuisine, but I know some people actually struggle with Asian food. So if you have different tastes and your stomach is a bit pickier, that's something I guess to take note of. Obviously, an expensive city, so plan your lifestyle accordingly. or negotiate your salary accordingly. Just be open-minded, I guess, and flexible. Because again,
Right.
like every new country is a new experience, and you never know where it will lead. Maybe you will find some new opportunities here. Maybe Singapore will be a stepping stone to some other place. So I guess just be flexible, open-minded, explore, and enjoy. It sounded like a toast, like no zdоровье.
Cheers.
If you like this video, check out the next one. But you have only 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.